All right. I'd like to welcome everybody. And thank you, Ronald, for jumping on last second. Tonight's episode is on the bar. Well, and I'm not talking about the bar I like hanging out at or eating peanuts at. We're talking about the bar in the way of what standards we set, how we judge sometimes, how we judge ourselves and others. Um, how we maybe that bar that we keep pushing forward to try to reach more and more through training methods. Um, but I want to make sure everybody understands that bar isn't only around. You know what? I should give a little bit more time for people to come on, but and we'll cover this a little bit more. But that bar isn't only around fighting. It's we set a bar as far as behavior, maybe how you dress, how you treat others. Um, and I think that bar comes because we see others that we want to emulate and we want to push ourselves to be like. So it's going to be an interesting episode for everybody. We're gonna this is kind of off the top of the hat. We had a different episode planned, so I'm lucky enough to have some wonderful people I love talking with. And we're going to go a little bit free form tonight. I apologize if it doesn't have the same flow we usually have, but we're going to do our best job we can. And so, I just kind of covered, the idea of the bar, and we'll cover. I think the first thing is let's talk about, how we set the bar when we first come in. Is it, for me, I guess when I first came in, I had an idea of what I wanted to do. I wanted to fight. I wanted to hit people. But you don't know anybody yet. So you don't really have a bar to set to until that first time at practice where you get to see somebody. And, for me, that was my night, actually, Sir Forgan, just because of how dynamic of a fighter he was when I first came in. I was like, whoo, he can throw, and so, that was kind of, that's what I wanted to do or wanted to get to. I guess, and obviously it keeps moving from that point. That through my career, there's been a lot of changes through that bar. So, Ron, what did you have a same type of experience, or when you first came in, did you already have experience? Did you watch? I know others played before they started. So,
well, when I started back when there was no real age limit on fighting, so I started coming to practices and swinging a stick at 13. And I started actually putting on armor late and being 13 years old. And my first actual SCA war was Bro Creek War, which became Estrella later on. And my first goal, the first bar for me was just not to get my ass kicked. I was not the most athletic 14-year-old. In fact, I was like the last to be picked for any gym class sport. So anybody who thinks I was a natural should ask Paul Bellatrix, for example, and after he gets done laughing, he'll tell you all about it. But my first goal was the first bar for me was to win something, and that hitting that bar took like almost 2 years to actually, and then I'm like, okay, I'm starting to get a little bit of skill at this. So my next bar, and I'm going to set it really high, is I want to try and get knighted at 18. And I wanted to become a Duke at 21. And anybody I told those goals to laughed at me. And it ended up I missed them both by 1 year. I was knighted at 19 and I was a Duke at 22. So sure, I set the bar very high and I missed it, but still it doesn't suck. And I mean, after that, after I became a Duke and I made my wife a Duchess, I transferred what I set the bar for no longer at my own prowess, but developing the prowess of my area and my kingdom. So I wanted to start getting people knighted. I ended up in the next decade getting 7 people knighted, of my own, and plus several fosterlings that were whose knights had either left the SCA or moved out of kingdom. The bar, I've always said set a high bar, because even if you don't make it,
you're always striving for it.
Yep. But work towards that goal. The bar for me right now is just learning how to fight after 5 knee surgeries and having both shoulders operated on.
Well, let's save a little bit of that, because I think we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the episode.
Okay.
And I don't want you to have to go back through it. So we'll cover that later, because we're both going to be talking about kind of that bar later in your career. So Ragnavaldr, when you first got in the SCA, did you kind of have a goal? I mean, here in this case, I think we could use that bar as a goal in what we're talking about. So,
well, I was just thinking about that. How are we defining goal, or bar rather, as a goal, as something you want to emulate, or as something you want to use as a measuring tool? As far as, I guess, as a goal, I had no conscious goal when I first started. The realization and excitement of being able to play at a medieval game, pretend there were knights and fighting with weapons and shields and so on was exciting, and the group of people we were with were really great people. So really, at first, it was nothing more than a good time. So I suppose any goal I had was to literally experience those things. Early on, I had no great skill, so thinking of becoming somebody good was not something I had. So no, I had no bar then. I probably didn't, I suppose, consciously really choose a bar until after Forgan squired me, and that's when I had to finally look and say, okay, well, I must be worth something, because I'm being chosen as a squire, and I've been approached by a couple knights before that. So I think that's probably the first time I started even thinking about setting a goal, setting a bar. And in that case, I guess there were people that I saw, yourself included, who had great skill on the field. So I chose, I guess, little bars. I didn't have a bar. I had these little things where I wanted to learn from that person. So I had more goals than bars then. My seeing things as a bar, I probably didn't have until after, I'm going to say probably till after I was knighted, because I didn't think I was getting close to that yet. I thought I had at least a couple of years before people were looking at me by the time I was knighted. And then that's when the idea of a bar became, okay, well, now I'm a knight. Now I have, now I know, because I always looked up to knights. Now I'm going to assume people are going to look to me because I'm a knight. And that's when I started actually looking at people as measuring tools. Muted.
That's one of those places we're going to talk about is, in this case, we're talking that bar as a goal, but the bar could be also a standard, right? What we judge somebody by.
Yes.
So it's definitely, and setting that bar, as Ron said, setting that bar in one place isn't necessarily always going to stay in that place. That bar can change, and what you want to do next, or what you want to act like next. You could literally want to become a better person, and I think that's a huge thing. Bess, how about you?
I always wanted to be a knight. From the minute I heard about the SCA, I wanted to be a knight. But then I found out that women couldn't fight. But then I found out that they could fight, but it was really discouraged. And then being in the hinterlands of the Middle Kingdom in Ontario, Canada, in Ottawa at the time, we didn't really have a lot of fighters up here, and we certainly didn't have very many knights in Ontario. But in the Middle Kingdom, we had Sir Fern, and she was knighted in 1986. I know this because I authorized in 87. And I wanted to, and so if Fern could do it, then I could do it also, I thought. I didn't really know what I was talking about at the time, so I thought, how hard can it be? And then I recently found a copy of a letter I wrote to somebody. Once I was knighted, I got knighted in January, and I said, I kind of don't really know what to do at this point. I could win coronet, I guess. And then 6 months later, I won coronet. And my bar for myself since then has been set to be a good knight. And I don't honestly know what that is. So I know that I keep striving to be a good knight, and one day maybe I'll get there. I don't know if that means prowess. I don't know if that means in chivalry. I don't know. I don't exactly know what that means, but that is my own personal bar. And of course now, well, heck, I got to fight you three gentlemen and beat you. That's got to be my bar now.
All right, Master Davius. How you doing? Good to see you here. We kind of started the episode, and so I'd like to introduce everybody to Master Davius from Trimaris. He actually came up with the idea. I was happy to. He kind of brought it, and I was like, "That's an interesting subject, the bar." So right now we're talking about kind of when we first got in, what we thought that bar was. In other words, what kind of goal we set when when you're first getting into the SCA. So I'm going to go ahead and throw you on there, and go ahead.
So when I first started, I was the guy who I was juggling with some friends of mine at another thing at an event, and I saw people off in the corner fighting with actual swords, and I was like, "Wait, hold up! That I can do that. That's a thing I can do for real." And I just wanted to go and throw swords around, and I was having a great time. I was the guy who didn't want to wear the garb, like I'm here to do the fighting thing. Y'all not getting me in that lame poofy shirt. It's not happening. I went to practice in the sweatshirt and sweatpants, and that's what I did. And then they were like, well, there's more fighting at actual events, but you got to put the shirt on. And then so I started putting the shirt on, and obviously it's a slippery slope. And now I'm out online shopping for fabric and stuff. But the important thing is someone asked me very early on in my career when they wanted to start teaching me how to get better. I didn't realize when I first started that there was a way to get better. I had played sports, but I had done combat. I had taken Muay Thai, I had taken, martial arts, but it didn't click to me that this thing that I was having fun at was a fighting discipline. Actually, I was having fun. And when I realized that I could get better and win more, because I was enjoying myself even with all the losses, because I just wasn't good. I didn't have a system. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just out there swinging things around. And when someone offered to teach me how to do it, they asked me, did I want to be a hot stick in the SCA, or did I want to learn historical fencing? And my answer was just, not losing all the time would be good, And so I learned I learned how to get better, and what I needed to do, and to have a plan, and how to actually enact the fight. I not just be out there throwing my swords around and hoping for the best, to know what a parry was, what a bind was, how to set these things up. And once I got a system and a plan for how to fight, things went a lot better. And I still, in my brain, was just out there having fun, and I didn't realize that there were people who were looking at my progress, and they were thinking, okay, hey, I need to be where Davius is, or I need to beat Davius so I can get to where I want to go. I didn't think of it that way. It wasn't competition overall for me. It was just fun. And so I would just go out and fight until I couldn't hold my arms up anymore. And I didn't realize that there were people who, and then if somebody I hadn't seen in a while, asked me to go fight, I would go fight them even then, because I was just having fun. It was my way of hanging out with my friends, right? And I didn't get until some people started talking to me about how, people thought they were better than they were because of how they did against me. And then it still took some more people explaining to me that there are people who are out there who aren't just fighting me because they like fighting me. they're gauging where they are and how well they do against me about how their skill has increased from the last time they fought me or over time or whatever. And I had to learn, and that's what the concept that I brought in was like, I had to learn that I can't just, I've become somebody who doesn't just get to go fight anymore. Right.
Yeah, and I think, and we're gonna jump into that part in a little bit more.
Okay.
I kind of usually try to bring up. We start from the beginning, day one, and now you're, and I guess we can. I'm going to go ahead and let's go ahead and talk about that. What happens? Well, let's go talk about the training because you kind of dived into that and then burned through that a bit. And
sorry,
I found it interesting because that came in the same way. The fun was all about the fun. So let's talk about that. So we're gonna, I guess, this is a great introduction to when we first got in, but the development, I guess we first get in, we think, okay, maybe the bar is to have fun, right? Maybe that if the goal in the very beginning is I want to do this because it looks fun. So if you don't hit that bar and you don't get there, then maybe it doesn't happen for you. And then as you go, we reset that bar, as Davius was talking about, we reset that bar. We like, oh, maybe I want to train differently. Maybe I want to do what that person's doing. For sure. I mean, we see that in everything like garb and armor and fencing gear and all of that stuff. It's like you first get in, you have, stuff, carpet armor from way back. And somebody puts a blue bucket on, you're like, ooh, that looks a lot better. I want one of those, right? So that bar is constantly going up, and we've seen that develop, and so is the prowess or the fighting in fencing and in fight and heavy weapons fighting and in all of those things. I think we have seen advancements, and I think that bar. Now we're talking like a large bar that everybody's living by because everybody's seeing, and that whole bar is raising across the society. And sometimes that bar raises, and unfortunately, and we'll talk about negative sides of the bar later, because that bar could raise and cause people to leave because it's not as much fun for them. So let's talk about that a little bit. Ron, do you want to go next?
No, I'll go. Why don't you go first?
Okay. Well, actually, I'm going to throw Ragnavaldr. Ragnavaldr, you came in. It was interesting because you like I remember you coming in and you were enjoying the SCA, and fighting wasn't part of it at the very beginning, right?
Yeah, I think my first Pennsic was a non-fighting one. I think I think all I did was scout the woods or something like that. Yeah. It wasn't even authorized then. It was just cool to be with everybody and be in the atmosphere that is the SCA, and when Davius mentioned that earlier about he was just loving being in it. Every time I hear that now, like we've talked about in other episodes, I remind myself again that for people coming in, that's the thing that we need to foster is, that's the other thing that came up as we were talking about bars that we've set for ourselves. And a thought that came to mind when you were just talking is we set bars for other people.
Oh yeah.
Right? All our people who come to practice now, especially our practice, because it's become much more organized, much more about learning. We've got our ladder drills we start with, and I know that was nothing like what we used to do, right? It was basically you come and do pickup fights when we first started, right? Yep. And now you guys have done studying on other fighting arts and brought those in, so it's very organized. Ronald, thanks for bringing the cat in. Every video has to have at least one cat.
At least one cat.
Yes, me sure.
So I realized that when you were talking, we actually do that. When our people come in, we try to let them have fun. See, this is what we're doing. Here's fun. Enjoy throwing the stick. And have a good time, and then we just have expectations. Hey, here's some ladder drills you can do to get better with the footwork. And hey, when you're throwing that shot, try it this way. We're constantly, so we kind of set the bar for people now. When I started, we didn't have that. It was basically, you get together and you have a good time. And if you wanted to learn, you could ask people. But like Davius said, you just just didn't do that.
There's
Right. So
a
that's where it
cycle.
was.
There's like a cycle in fencing where, like, because we have trouble keeping people, like, so if we make them do drills for too long before we let them fight, it's hard to get them to stay. But if we let them just immediately jump into the fighting, it's also hard to get them to stay because they don't do well, right? So we have to go. It's like a cycle thing with the rapier side, at least, where you'll come in and there'll be periods where it's just like, all right, here's a sword, here's go do things, and then there's another period where, like, okay, there's footwork drills that you're going to do for 3 months before we let you touch a sword and stuff like. And then we're trying to find the right medium where we get people to stay and they get good, because of teaching, and also because, you know, we just let them have fun. And it's, you guys have apparently gotten it down, but we're still searching for that.
I think what the reason it works for us is because when we typically start the practices now with these footwork drills, but it's not, nobody's required to do footwork drills. And we have some people who, they come and they put armor on. We're doing footwork drills and they've got armor on. They're heading for the field. As soon as there are 2 people in armor, they're fighting. You know, we have a few people who don't do any footwork drills, and that's totally cool.
Yeah.
So I think the reason it works for us is we provide for both. We have these drills. This is why we do them. You want to work with them? That's great. We'll work with you. If you don't want to do them, don't. I sometimes do them with everybody, but I often go off and do them on the side on my own, because I really like them. But I have things I want to work on when I do the footwork drills. It's not just blindly do them, right? So I go off and I work on what my body mechanics are. I guess that's a good example of where my bar is at now, right? My bar for that changed because the people I fight with have brought in this really great learning tool and showed me these other ways of moving and of standing. And because my overall goal is to be better than I am, I now have another bar set. I want my footwork to improve. And that bar is the people around me at my practice who are all fighting with exceptional movement.
Hey, Ron, you were just talking about this actually, weren't you?
Yeah, about you mean about training? I was
about footwork and you know you're kind of changing yours, right?
The show about how I have some of the worst footwork in the known world as far as Dukes go. I mean, you know, and that was something that even when I was young, you know, I was told by various people in my kingdom, they're like, your footwork is terrible. Good for you. You've got really good hands because your feet suck. But yeah, I mean, currently the bar for me is to get some good footwork. In this almost the twilight of my career as a fighter is to actually have better movement, because, you know, I mean, at my height, I could take on almost anybody if they stood toe to toe with me. But man, if somebody had good footwork, I had problems. It's like, it's funny you talk about the bar as far as training. As we've discussed, I grew up 15 minutes away from Paul Bellatrix. He came to my local practice every week. We had half an hour to an hour of training before anybody put armor on every week. With that, you know, and no one was allowed to put armor until Paul was done, and you know, and then when I moved out to the east, it was very free for all. You know, they cut up some blue pickle barrel plastic, threw it on you, threw on a spun bowl helmet, put a certain shield in your hand, and threw you out there. And I was like, man, no. So I put together a practice where I started kind of bringing in a lot of stuff that Paul taught. And a lot of the locals were very resistant to that, you know. And my bar for training was I wanted to take pretty much the people, the cast-offs from the local baronies, and get them knighted, and that was how you got a lot of the knights in the southern region in the East Kingdom is from that. But I'm glad to see that some of those have come since me, like Sir Arn, and some others have developed their own training programs, with, very much along the lines of what I did with some success. So that was a bar that worked out real well. It's saying that when I first moved out here, of getting the southern part of the East Kingdom, training, up to where it is in the West, or was in the West at that point.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting because what we're talking about right now is, is that bar that we set for a practice. So it's not only our individual bar, but a bar that we set for practice. That's like, if really people come to practice and they look, and if Ragnavaldr is doing some stuff or I'm doing some stuff, and a lot of other people who are getting good at stuff are doing certain things, they're like, oh, well, that's what you must do to get better. And it's okay all of a sudden, right? When we first got in, we were like, no way in hell would I do that, right? And I think I think that's the reason why, Ragnavaldr, I talk about this all the time. We watch the people that come to our practice. We didn't have a real great footwork for a number of years. Our footwork really started, I don't know, 10 years ago or so. And now, me and Ronald constantly have to keep remembering to move because we grew up without it. And now everyone who comes to practice, we're like, watch a person at a third practice, are like, I hate that they can just do it naturally, because that's what they see, that their entry bar is already where we had to graduate ours to. Right. It's really this kills me. Bess, you got something on that?
Yeah, actually, it's kind of interesting. I take notes as we talk. So I'm just going to throw all the things I wrote down. I think, Brannos, there's you, maybe Ragnavaldr, saying that we have bars for others. And I think that's something that is an unconscious expectation that we might have. I have this bar. The king and the queen must be in a certain way. Dukes must behave like this, and knights must be like this. The mods must be like that. So I think that's super important to be aware of. What do you personally expect from people? Like, where's the bar that you set? As we've been online so much in the past couple of years with COVID, I have seen the bar set for a night so high that at times it's made me think that I should turn my belt in, because I can never live up to everything that I've ever read that a knight should be. So I think that's something that we need to be aware of. We were talking about practice. You talk about how people come to practice and they see people working, and the bar for your practice is set to a certain standard. But I think it's also important to know that other people have different bars. Like somebody might come and say, well, my bar for me tonight is, I just want to hang out with my friends. I'll hang out, we'll chat and we'll talk and we'll socialize. And one of the things I know that Ragnavaldr is frequently saying is that we need not steal the fun from those people. So while we're all at the same place and bars are in place, people have different bars. And just because yours is not mine does not mean that your bar is wrong. So I want to say that. And the other thing is that as a whole, as a society, I think with regards to what or how fighting is progressing, I think our expectations, like our bar, I don't know why I put an accent on that one. I think the society bar has changed. That when we were kids, and Ronald, as you said, it was like rock'em sock'em robots, right? I'd stay in front of you, you'd stay in front of me, and okay, we'd see what would happen. Now I think as a whole, there's sort of this feeling coming through, and I don't know, maybe it's come from the fencers who have joined us, who are more movementy than fighters have been in the past. But I think the expectation now, or the bar, is that you don't stand, you aren't where you were, and that you don't just do stuff and hope maybe you figure out something. We're not reinventing the wheel. And I think, for example, the Sunday practice that Brannos, you're leading, many of us are taking it online. I'm up in Eldemir. We have Ragnavaldr's taking it. We have people all over the known world signing into this. And I think that sort of communication that we have now helps to change the bar. Like, hey, I'm aware of that. And up here in Eldemir, myself and Sir Alfwin, we have taken this out to our practices and are actively talking about movement. So even if the fighters here in Eldamere don't actively attend it, they're starting to hear about this movement craze. You know, it might actually work. So I think to a certain extent, there are multiple bars, and I think they change all the time. And then, of course, and I don't know when you want to get into it, is when is the bar moved or set too high?
Well, and that is actually,
da, da, da.
Yeah, totally. And that, you know, that can be the negative side, and we're definitely going to talk about that. You know, but before we talk about that one, and I'm going to throw this back to Davius. Here's, you were going to just kind of jump into this, is how you ended up being used as the bar, right? I mean, you know, obviously a lot of people, it was probably even before you were a mod, right? I'm guessing people looked and they were like, ooh, I want to get, I like to be able to touch that guy once. That's my bar.
One of the things, yeah. And being in the Air Force while I was learning, I moved around a lot. So I lived in a lot of different kingdoms. Started in the East, obviously, lived in Ostiora, but I was part of a big pool of people who all started at the same time, even when I was in the East. So we were all kind of like together when we started. And then once, you know, some of us started getting better, like, and doing more, winning more often than the others. And then I got kind of a name, and some of the people who remembered me from when, you know, before anybody really knew who Davius was, to the point where people started recognizing who Davius was. Some of those people hadn't seen me in a while, and they wanted to see where they were. They remembered being, you know, pretty even with me and wanted to know. And I hadn't accepted yet that I had gotten to this point. I still thought I was just me, you know, regular old Davius. I didn't realize where I stood in the hierarchy. I thought I was just me still. I didn't realize that I had been winning at a clip that had put me to a point where people were looking to me as someone who was a goal to be like or to be able to beat. And especially the people who had started around the same time as I was. So to them, like, since they had been doing it around the same time I had been doing it and had been doing it most of the same places, if they could be even with me, whatever accolades the people were giving me should also be given to them. And this is not a negative thing. It's just a matter of they like, look, I should be where he is because we started at the same time. And I hadn't quite gotten that yet. I was still happy fencer guy. And sure, I mean, I had almost packed my stuff up because I was tired and I've been out here for 7 hours, but I haven't seen you in like a year and a half. Of course I'll come fight you. And then I go fight him. And then I'd find out that people had been thinking that this person had advanced to a certain point because they had done well against me, right? Like, they'd seen me fight them 5 passes or whatever, and they won 3 of them. They're like, oh, well, then, you know, they should be really good. And then that performance level wasn't there. And then the next day, like, they would see them and they'd catch me like earlier in the day, and then they'd get smoked. And they were like, wait a minute, you know, what's going on here? I thought I was at this level. And also, I don't know if this happens at heavy practices where there's some people who like to keep track of practice, like keep track of win-loss records at practice. And they're like, hey man, I just went 50-50 with Davius. You know, I'm like, bro, I had like my 30 and a stick. I was working on stuff. Like, it wasn't, my bad. I didn't know that's where we was at. And like, but like, I don't feel like me beating anybody up at practice benefits anybody. Like, I don't get anything out of it. They don't learn anything. I mean, unless it's like humility, I guess. I don't know. But even that doesn't come because I'm supposed to be able to beat them up. So I don't even know if that's, you know, a thing. So I don't treat practice as a proving ground for others. It's a place, it's practice. It's where I work on things. If you catch me at an event and you say you want some gauging fights, now I have learned that I can give you gauging fights. I will fight you at I have accepted and gotten to the point where I know that I can fight at a Grant level. I can fight at a pure level, and I can fight at a, you know, an AOA level, and I can gauge how well you do against that fight. And if that's where you're supposed to be, you know, if where you're trying to get to is AOA level, then that's the fight I give you. And I want to see, and I can tell you where I feel you fit into that. And you can see from that how you do against the average AOA level fighter. If you're trying to get your white scarf or OTC, I guess, then or your ogre, I can fight you at that level, and I can see, and you can see where you fit in at that bar. And then if you want the A game, you want me, middle of Penzic champions fight one pass, and one of us has to go because my crown asked me to kill you. Okay, I can give you that fight too, and then you can see if you're ready for that, right? But it's become part of my job as a caretaker of fencing, and I hate to bring this in as an outside comment, but like that's why I still wear my white scarf and my ogre pin as well as my collar, because that's two separate jobs. One is a caretaker of fencing at a kingdom level, and the other is a caretaker of fencing at a society level, and that's my job. Like, and I feel the same way with like even heavy. Like one of my jobs, if I ever get an OTC, is to make sure that heavy fighting at the Grant level is in a healthy place. It's either better than I found it, or at least in a good place when I leave it. And if I'm ever blessed to have a white belt, my job is to make sure that happens at a society level. So that's part of the job, is to make sure that the people coming up understand where they are and can strive to be better, and have someone who is has been accepted to have been at that point, who has been where they are as well, who can tell them how to make that journey, right? And how to help them along the way, because that's my job, is to get them where I am. Because there were people who helped me get where I am, or I wouldn't be here. Like I wouldn't have been able to do it by myself. Like I didn't have the close up peer, situation. I didn't have a white scarf. I didn't have one ogre who was helping me, but the entire practice at Tadcaster was there, and it takes a village sometimes, and that's what happened. And so that's why I always feel like I don't need you to be my student for me to teach you how to get better. Like I just need to know that you want to get better, and I will teach you how to get better. And that's my job, is to make the fighters around me better, because better fighters means I get better fights, which means I get better. And that's the goal, is to always be helping the community, and obviously selfishly helping myself. You're muted. You forgot to mute yourself. You're muted.
Did it again. I love that you bring that up, because that's that whole selfish idea. It is selfish, because what you're doing is you're building a practice, and when you build that practice and everybody's building that practice, the bar of practice goes up. The higher that bar gets, the better everybody can become. And I think that's the most important part, and that's why we keep pushing that. So, Ragnavaldr, you got something on that?
Well, I think it is when it's in practice. Yeah, it's there's a selfishness to helping others, I guess, at practice. The better they get, the better I'm going to get. So there's certainly that, and like we've talked about before, there's the other selfish part where when you help people improve and they get success and you're part of that, that's exciting. But I think that takes us in a different tangent. So I think we're talking about two different bars and at two different places. Practice, as Davius said, practice is practice. I fight a lot of different ways at practice. I will work on things, and I will change my parameters. My victory conditions, as I like to say. I'll change my victory conditions when I'm fighting somebody that I am much better at, that I am at. I will sometimes, because I was thinking about what Davius said, do I fight at different levels at practice? And sometimes I do. But what I typically try to do is I change my own victory conditions. So sometimes I'll fight right-handed. Sometimes what I'm looking to do is hit someone in the place that they defend the best. How can I open up that spot? Can I hit them with one shot? Can I block all their shots? Those kinds of things, where it allows me to work on something while still being at a level at which they can perform. And I do hear, I think we all have some of what Davius says. Hey, I hit Ragnavaldr. You know, there's a fun story I got told, which I thought was cool. A few knights had come to one of our practices a few years back, and I'd fought them all and stuff. And of course, like you do on your way home, they were talking about how things went in practice. And one was going on and on about how he had hit me a couple times in practice, at the practice, and was really happy because he hadn't killed me before, and he killed me a couple times or something like that. And he had a couple angles he didn't have before, so he was really excited about it and going on. And the other two knights are snickering at him, and he's like, well, what are you guys laughing at? And he goes, you know, Ragnavaldr was fighting right-handed all night. And he was like, God. He didn't realize that I had been fighting right-handed. So his success was, you know, partially because I was fighting right-handed. So it's a tough thing. I find when you find out you are the bar, what do you do when you're in that position? Do you always fight at 100% because they're trying to measure themselves? And if you don't fight at 100%, are you giving them false information? So I found that I had to, and I still work on it, changing the conditions of the fights depending on the individual and where we're at. And though I don't think Davius said it, I think it's a big part of what he was talking about is communication. So at a practice, I've come to ask people, are you working on a thing? Do you just want to fight? Do you want to fight half speed? Do you want to, what do you want to do in this fight? What's your goal in this fight? And then I can blend that in with my own goal, and we can work on some things. And that's the benefit I've gotten from that. When Davius was first talking about fighting at the different levels, I was like, oh my God, what do I do? Do I fight everybody 100%? And I find a lot of times that's exactly what I do is I fight them at 100%, but not with all my 100, not with 100% of my abilities, right? Like when I fight right-handed, I'm not as good right-handed. So I'll fight people right-handed. I'm giving them a 100% fight, but it's right-handed.
But it's right. Yeah.
Exactly. So it was nice to hear some of your input, Davius, to help clarify what I'm actually doing. In essence, I am setting a bar for myself, and since our practice is so active, I'm helping with my opponent to recognize the bar they are setting, so we can both fight the goals we target the bars we're both looking to achieve in those fights through communication. Now, pickup fighting, that can vary. A lot of times pickup fighting, people are typically looking to see, you know, like at an event there, that's when it's really bar fighting. I'm being used as a measuring tool. Mm-hmm. But there again, I'm finding I do a lot of the same thing. You know, it's great to see you. How you been? That's great. What would you like to do? Just want to have a few passes? Just want to play? Do you want to, you know, and you can tell in their tone. That's usually how I have to end up doing it is how do they respond? You know, what's their body language? What are they telling me? Are they here to beat me? Well, you're here to beat me. You want to measure. So let's go. Here's the full length of the measuring stick. You find your place on it.
Yeah, 100%. And I do apologize for leaving that out. Communication is super key.
Yeah.
One of the things that I did do after I had run into that situation with the kid who was like, yeah, I went 50-50 with Davius. And I'm like, bruh, no. Was that I put out to the kingdom that I will fight you from now on. Where you are, the step that you are heading to is where your fight against me is going to be. Like, that's what I'm going to bring to you. And you will know by how well you did, how much work you think you should be putting in to get there, right? Like, because if you aren't a white scarf yet, I'm going to bring Grant level fight to you. And however badly that, you know, punts you around the field, that should let you know how much work you need to be doing. If you are a white scarf, I'm going to bring you my mod level fight so that you can feel like, okay, look, this is what I need to do to get to that level. Because I don't want you to, I want to help get everybody to the next step. But it is communication. You're right. Like communication is definitely, we have to let them know, because it's just like any other thing. If the two people aren't there for the same thing, it's not going to work out, right? Like if we're not communicating what we want from each other, we can't get there. So if they want, hey, look, I want Davius to bring, like you said, the full measuring stick. I want it all. Like I want to know where I stand. Let's go. And again, one of the things I had to teach my one of my cadets now, because she had an issue with thinking that she didn't have good practices if she didn't win. The measure of getting better isn't just changing your win-loss ratio. It's, did you have a plan? Were you able to execute the plan? Sometimes you have a plan and you're able to execute the plan and you lose anyway because it was a bad plan. But the point is that that was still a good fight because you had a plan, you executed the plan, and you did what you needed to do to execute the plan, which meant that you had control of the fight, which is super important. So like you said, and that's why I change, I fight with my 30 and a stick, or if I feel like my last few fights, I haven't been moving as much as I need to, then okay, because I'm a big guy, I can nuke people from orbit. Okay, cool. I take the short sword and a defensive secondary, and now I have to move, right? Because I can't just nuke you from halfway across the field. So I change, or, look, I'm not going to kill anybody tonight. I'm just taking everybody's hands tonight, or whatever. I put myself, like you said, I change my parameters for how I'm fighting to make the fight still challenging, no matter what the skill level of the other people. Because I still need to work on stuff just like they do. And communication, again, is I mean, I can't stress it enough. Any relationship, communication is important. Whether it's a pickup fight, practice, whatever, there has to be communication. And I apologize for having left that out, and thank you for bringing it up, because
no problem. That's why we're here together.
Yeah,
that's why we, that's a big part of. I think a big part of why we have so many different people is because everybody brings a different view, and I guess on that point, sometimes we get the restriction of the bar. In other words, hey, I want to do it a different way, but the bar at practice is this, and so there are definitely negative sides. So it's nice that people can communicate here different sides of how we talk. I'm very, I'm very focused at communication. I'll ask them, are we training? Are we not training? Make sure they understand that we are training, because if they don't think they're training and they think they're fighting and you're training, we're not playing the same game and they're confused. And that doesn't go a long way, because you're building false confidence in them in some cases. And, I also, at the end, I usually tell people at the end, I don't care what level you're at, tell them, let's do 3 crown rounds, or for us, crown rounds, let's do 3 top fights. Mm-hmm. Okay. That means you bring the mod game, even if it's these AOA level person, mm-hmm. right? Because they need to see that experience and experience that too. And the best part about it is that's what they expect from you. And you have to show them that as well. They want you may be their bar. And if you compete at a certain level lower, you may be falsely presenting what the bar really is to them. Right. So you have to be very careful. And I think communication is how we have to express that. So good communication at practice is critical. So Bess, you have stuff. You got a big smile on your face.
Yeah, I've just enjoyed listening to everybody talk. So I want to point out and ask a favor of the people who are watching right now, and maybe if somebody else is listening later, drop a chat in or a comment in YouTube. But because we're the hosts, we talk about things from our point of view. But I'm curious. So the people who are watching right now, when you come to practice, if you're like, oh yeah, that person's really good, or they're a bar person, however you define a bar person, what is it that you want from them? We're like, yeah, well, if you come out, I'm going to give you this and I'm going to do that. But maybe that's not what you want. I'm just deciding randomly what I'm going to give you. I know we've been talking about communication, but sometimes people forget to communicate, myself included. So, and I just go out and I do what I think they want. So for those of you who are watching, if you wouldn't mind just giving us a comment, tell us what would you like from a bar person, both at practice and say in a tournament as well. I have been part of an ongoing discussion about fighting newer people in tournaments. If I'm going to fight somebody who's new, say they've just recently authorized, statistically and probability is that I'm going to win. You know, I'm a knight and stuff. But I might say that I have to block 5 shots before I start, doing my own fight. Or I might take an arm before I take a head. Other people, Brannos, who I've been having this conversation with, says to me, Bess, you're full of cack. You just walk out, and if you one-shot them, you one-shot them because it's tournament. And I'm not advocating that you throw a fight, but I'm saying switching victory conditions a little. So Brannos and I have been having this conversation for months now. So I'm going to ask you for your bar fights. What are you looking for? What would you like, both, as I said, at practice and in tournament? Drop us a comment and let us know. Really, the heck with them. Tell me so that I can be better. I can be better for our fighters up here, and that makes me a better opponent at practice. And it'll help give me some knowledge for what to do in the future, because I do ask people, and they always get these big eyes, and they're like, what are you working on? What do you want to do? I just want to fight. And like, I feel like I'm putting them on the spot, and I feel really bad. I'm like, oh, okay, we'll just practice then. We'll just go. But I think that's not always the best. So there you go, Brannos. That's what I wanted to say.
I think you're throwing me under the bus here.
A little bit. I'm not ashamed of that.
Well, just remember when I tell all of those people in those tournaments that you were sandbagging them.
I never. So I'm not sandbagging. I'm changing my own personal victory conditions until I probably win. Here's the thing. Like, I remember being a novice, right? I remember going, no one shot. For the love of God, no one shot. I just didn't want to be one-shotted. And if I see somebody walking around, they're like, their shields are down here, and I'm like, oh man. Before I one-shot, like, let's not one-shot, let's just go for a weird ass target and get that, and then I'll kill them. See, we're getting comments now, so I want to stop talking so I can.
So here's my question. Well, we'll talk more later. This is our ongoing discussion. So, Ron, do you got anything on this stuff that we're talking about?
As somebody who was the bar for a lot of unbelts at an early age, when I won Miss Coronet, I suddenly became the bar for every up-and-coming unbelt in the kingdom to beat. And that turned out to be a real negative, because some of them really didn't want to lose to an 18-year-old kid with a coronet on his head. So that's, to me, the negative side of some people making somebody their bar, is suddenly it becomes all important to beat them, and that can end up being some problems. But as far as like how I approach, I sort of agree with Bess, right? I don't want to humiliate a new person. I'll change my victory conditions too. Like, I'm going to hit you in the offside body, or I'm going to leg you first, or I'm going to do something. I'm not going to just go out there. I mean, except for crown. If I'm fighting a crown and I'm serious about it, I'm sorry, you're in crown, you're a target. You're getting hit. I'm not, because my mentor took it easy on a newbie in the first round of crown, and he was a duke, and the newbie one-shotted him. And he was on the favorites to win. So you can take that to an unfortunate extreme.
Mm-hmm.
But I do change my victory conditions somewhat too to suit my opponent. If I'm fighting somebody who is like, I want to get ready for crown, or I want to get knighted next year or whatever, they get my 100% best fight that I can give them at that moment. If somebody's like, I'm just out here for fun, then they get a different fight, but it just depends on where their personal bar is and what they want out of me.
I guess here's a point on that is the one thing I have to say after the conversation is just remember that if you participate even at practice and somebody beats you because you're holding back, that's their win.
Right. Oh
yeah. Don't take that win away from, because that's the worst is taking a win away from somebody. You gave it up. You own it.
No, because I've seen some people beat people way above their pay grade and then have that thunder stolen by somebody on the sidelines going, well, they were out of practice or they just did this or they just like, no. All history's going to remember is who beat who. It's like they're not going to remember the fact that, that their shoulder is bugging them today or, they didn't sleep well last night. Nope, they're going to not remember any of that. They're just going to remember who won and who lost. But you're right, I mean that's a gamble you take when you don't give somebody your all. You take the chance of giving them bragging rights when they may not have totally earned them. But that's it's not an easy thing to navigate, which is why we're talking about it.
Yep, exactly. So, let's jump on to we're gonna turn this subject a little bit. We're gonna turn the subject. There's so many different things. I do want to cover a little bit of the negative side of the bar, so we'll keep the next subject short because there's not really an answer. But there's the bar of, and I think a lot of people are interested. There's that bar that you have to hit to get an award. Especially when we're talking to be a master of defense or a knight. And I think lots of people have huge questions about that. And, the big piece there is, I think it's at least worth a little bit of conversation right now. I don't think there's an answer, but, we do have to judge people. So, Davius, how do you say your name right?
Davius. Or Davius.
Davius? Okay, thank you.
I answered the Davo. Look, if you're getting close, I'll respond. I'm used to getting butchered, but yeah.
Look at Bess. She wrote it down so she remembers.
Not Davy me.
I love her.
Not Davy me. Not Davy you. Davy us.
Davy us. Oh, I love it. So, anyways, now you have to judge people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a hard place because now we're talking, because especially nowadays we have to be careful on judging people and how that's presented and really how we look at it, because I think in the past there were probably people looked at it in a poor way. Nobody can be as good as me, but so how do you get through that? I mean, how long you've been a master of defense?
5 years now. I'm sorry.
Awesome.
5 years now. I was one of the first 4 in Trimaris. We got our little wrist smacked because we were only supposed to make 3, and they made all of us in the first weekend. But one of the things about our order is that it is still a fighting order, right? So there's a lot of things that I look at because it is a peerage, right? But first and foremost, to get into the club, the big scary guy with the sunglasses at night and the too small suit and the earpiece in his ear and the tablet is, can you scrap, right? You can't get past that guy to even pay to cover or talk somebody into letting you in until you get past that guy. If you can't fight, we can't, you got to be able to fight. Now, there are questions about weapons breadth, do they have to be able to be super good with a bunch of different forms, or is it okay to just be really, really good with one, form? Personal opinion, if dude can beat all of us with a spork, I'm not going to ask him how good he is with a plastic knife. Like, if he's got the spork and he's taking us all down, I'm not going to be like, well, yeah, but how good is he with the knife? No, he's got a spork and he's good enough to beat us all. I'm good right there. Now, there's a minimum bar, and you can meet that minimum bar and make up for me being willing to make you appear in other ways. But that is a hard fail. Like, yes, no, nothing moves past that. Can you meet that minimum fighting bar? And something that 50% of the people who have that award 50% of the time is something that I've heard. And I look at that, and there's an eye test, and that's kind of where I'm at. I've been told that it's hard. I shouldn't. That people think that I'm a bad judge of skill because of how good I am, which I don't understand, because at some point I wasn't where I am. So I have to know what it's like to be, where I am. But like, I don't expect you to be able to beat me now. If you're trying to get an ogre, I don't expect you. I'm not holding you to where I feel like I am right now. I'm holding you to where I was when I got my ogre, right? And if I feel like you could beat that Davius or go 50-50 with that Davius, then yes, I'm a yes vote, because you are at my bar for heavy. I mean, for ogre. If you are trying to get your mod, I'm still not holding you to where I am now. I've still been training since I got it. That's 4 years ago. I'm looking back at when I was handed mine. Where did you stand with that guy? Were you in his ballpark? Were you somebody he would consider on his level? Then yeah, okay, then I can vote yes for you. But again, it's not where I am now. It's where I was when I got that award. And so I don't hold people to, can they beat me now? Then no, I will not vote for them for this grant level sword fighting award. No, it's like, well, when I got my grant level sword fighting award, they would have whooped my behind. So yes, I'm a yes, like that's what it comes down to. You have to have your determination of what the minimum level of prowess for whatever you're voting for is. How you do it, I can't tell you. Like, that's you. But what I do is I look at where I was when I got it, and I'm a very introspective person. I am probably my harshest critic. I am probably harder on myself than anyone. I am well aware of every time that I lose a fight because I made a mistake. Every time I've won a fight, even though I made mistakes, I know. Like, a lot of people see my fights and they're like, man, Davius is smooth. And I know I tripped like twice, or I threw shots and my point control was off, and I almost missed parries and got lucky because I have fast hands. Like, all of those things, I know all of that happened. They don't see it. They see me picking that parry up at the last second and pointing that person in the face. They don't know how close I came to dying. Like, I shouldn't have picked that parry up. I missed it. Like, if I wasn't 6'1", I'd have died, but these are the things that happen, but I know that. So I can apply all of that knowledge to judging people.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to do, is like, where was I at the time I got it?
Gotcha.
Are they there? Yep, give it to them. And
and welcome to that perfectionist bar, by the way. None of us have a problem understanding that one, I tell you.
I didn't win good enough.
Exactly. Ragnavaldr. I mean, obviously, you have a few wins behind you and a lot of background. And I think we both struggle sometimes.
Always. I know you've used me as an example before, and to others when they've talked about it, and you said, okay, watch this. And you've asked me, in your last crown, can you name some of the people you beat? And I'm like, and then you say, okay, can you tell me when you got hit? And I can tell you which fights I got hit in, how I got hit, and why I got hit in those. And those are the things I remembered, right? Those are the things that matter to me. But you won the crown. Yeah, but I lost to a double kill in the first one. I lost a leg in the semifinals. So, that's the stuff I remember. Like Bess, I threw a bunch of notes down. So I'm gonna run right through these, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Go run through.
So I talked about the first time I remember setting a bar was after I was knighted, and I realized that you guys were talking, it brought back a memory about that at what level do we fight somebody and that kind of thing. And I realized, without realizing it, I had started to do that before I was knighted. I don't even know if I was squared at the time, but what I do remember is Dog was king, he was holding the field as king, and just having people come through and fight him. And I beat him. Okay. I'd been fighting 2 years, 3 years maybe, and I killed him. Right. The thought that went through my head was, this man has fought for years to be the best. And me, who's only fought 2-3 years, just killed him. So if I work hard, does that mean it's pointless? I mean, I'm not going to get anything out of it. If somebody like this has done all those years and this 2-3 year fighter kills him, what difference does it make? So that stuck in my head when I was getting to the point where I was realizing I was a bar when I was knighted. People were using me as this benchmark because I was a knight. If I fought down to their level and allowed them to hit me, I was giving them false information.
I never said let them hit you. I didn't say it. I'm going to smack you both. I swear to God.
But that's the way we're going to tell the story. The other side note on that was the tournaments that I was winning when I first started winning tournaments. If you remember back then, knights, it was kind of an unspoken thing. Hey, you're a knight. Don't fight in tournaments so much anymore because give other people a chance. And I remember winning them and people going, yeah, great, you won. And I remember thinking, yeah, but Sir so-and-so wasn't here. And so I really didn't get measured. I didn't get to fight against my bar in those fights. So when I fight in tournaments, though I get what Sir Bess is saying, I do not. In a tournament, it's 100%. You get 100%. Because the beauty of our game is we, at the top of our game, can fight somebody with 100% and nobody gets hurt. Right? Nobody dies, nobody gets injured, nothing terrible happens. They do get one-shotted and out. But you know what? Looking back, that's what I expected. Now, of course, as my turn came and I was on the throne and I held the list field, I realized looking back, I didn't beat Dog. Dog had all these things in his brain because he was king. He had other things to do during that day. This was just a break for him to play. I was some unknown unbelt, so he just goofed around with me and he lost the fight. I get that now. But at the time, I was like, what the hell just happened? So those things became important to me. So that's why, especially in a tournament, the communication's important out of tournament. In tournament, it's 100%. If I can one-shot you because you're brand new, then by God, I'm going to put you down fast. Because I want that person to understand that when you spend 20, 30 years fighting, you can one-shot people too. It's not a waste of time to do that. So I think that's important. We've been talking about using these upper level fighters, people using us as a bar. And though I don't think that's terrible, a thought occurred to me is, should we be the bar? Right? Should we be the one, the best fighter? Should we really be the bar for a lot of these people? I think for a lot of these people, the bar should be their peers. Right? The people that you're fighting who are kind of like Davius said, he had people that he fought with, started about the same time and went up. Those people who were using him as a bar at the time, I think were making a wise decision. Here's somebody who's theoretically at my level. I'm going to use him as a measuring bar. If somebody who's in a few years comes to Davius now, and like you said, he beats them or doesn't beat them, what does that mean? What kind of bar is that? It doesn't help them at all. So I will stop. I had a couple others, but I'm gonna let them go because they
no problem. Ron, do you have anything?
Well, as far as applying the bar, as it was discussed, to people getting fighting awards, it's really hard for me to do that because, like, I got knighted almost 39 years ago. And I can't say, well, I was at a certain level then because I was kind of delayed some because I was a teenager and acted like it. So that kind of delayed me until I was at a higher prowess level than a basic knight. So what I do is I say, okay, how does this person do against the other knights in this kingdom? How do they do against the average guys, not against, you know, I mean, you know, it's tough to have bars where it comes to people that are up and coming for our OTC or for getting knighted, you know. And for me, it's doubly hard because, you know, it's been so long for me. I don't truthfully remember what I did back then fighting wise. I mean, I'm a much more dynamic fighter now than I was in 1983 when I got the accolade. You know, and back then I had 4 or 5 shots. I threw them really well, but now there's so much more to what I do, and it's just such a different game than it was. I mean, you know, nobody used thrusting tips on broadswords when I was in my kingdom when I was up and coming. Nobody, you know,
well, and the bar of the probably of that order has gone up since.
Right. You know, so I mean, you know, for me, it's like when I look at a candidate, I go, okay, well, let's look at how he does against the guys who recently got done, or the guys that are kind of in the middle of the pack, you know. But yeah, I had a very similar experience to Ragnavaldr here, where I went out at a Burrow Creek, which became Estrella later on, and the King of Aidenveld was holding the field, and I just went out there and just hammered him. You know, I just turned 18. I'm like, wow, man, I just hammered the, you know, King of Aidenveld. Boy, aren't I big, you know. And then some guy in a Freon can with a round shield just completely crushed me. Yeah. he wanted to win the next kite crown and was King of Kite 3 times, but I had no idea. They just looked like some guy in a Freon can with a round shield, you know. So anyways, that's my bit on that.
All right, Bess.
So actually, I was thinking about bars, and you guys have raised some really great points, and I want to say thank you for them. It is interesting to me. When I was on Vigil, I was told, as you know, as Davius says, see, I had to look down, check your name. As Davius says, don't judge people against you as you will be in the future, but judge them as you are now. And I think for those of us who are very old knights, and I am a very old knight, I think we have to say that has to change to a certain extent. As Ronald, as you just said, the game is different now. We don't go toe to toe and do rock'em sock'em robots anymore. It is a different game, and to that extent, I think that while I can take from that, remember how you are in comparison to your peers at this point in time. My peers then might not be knighted now. And for those of you who are watching this and wonder about this, sometimes it gets brought up in meetings. Well, you know, they can't beat me. And I have frequently been known to say, yes, but your grace, I can't beat you either. So I want to assure you that this is not something that we just say or do in a vacuum. Like this is a real life thing to say. But the other thing that I want to say, and it's kind of bars-esque. So earlier, Davius was talking, and he was saying, you know, I'm just Davius. And if you watch frequently, you'll hear me say, I'm just Bess. And he'll say, man, you know, in my brain, I'm having this fight, and I'm like, holy crap, I just barely, you know, blocked that, or I nearly died, but I didn't die. But from the outside, it looks like, yeah, look at me, I'm just blocking you, and I'm just winning, you know. And Ragnavaldr wins crown, he's like, man, I can tell you every shot that hit me and laid a stick on me, and you know, I can tell you everything I did wrong. And I think that's interesting. Up until Coach's Corner, and a couple of people I know who are the bar and who are, I'm like, well, you're Duke so and so. You know, angels sing when your name is mentioned. I always thought, you know, like the really good fighters walked around and said, yeah, I'm really confident. Yeah, nothing ever hits me, and I'm really good. And I'm, you know, and I'm like, I'm not like that. I'm like Ragnavaldr. I'm like, damn it. I'm like Davius. Man, I blocked it, but that was really hard. Or like, you know, I look at the good fighters, and they seem so calm and cool, what I perceive to be the great fighters, you know, and they're so calm and cool and collected. And on the inside, I'm like, Jesus Christ, I barely blocked that thing. So for those of you who are watching, I want you to know that on the inside, I think that we are very much like you are. Maybe our reflexes are a little better or honed more, or we do have different skills. But the great fighters that I know, the dukes that I know, the people who are names not only in their own kingdom, but throughout the society, uh, they're like me. So suddenly I have to say to myself, well, I don't think I'm quite so stinky anymore. Maybe I don't suck because I think, oh shit, I didn't block as many as I wanted to, or dang it, you know, I wanted to hit that one. It took me 3 times to take that shot. So it's a bit of a tangent, but I just wanted you to know that because, like, here I am, a knight and a viscountess, you know, right arms and all that good stuff. And I was having those doubts. And I want you to know that it's okay if you have those feelings inside because Ragnavaldr was honest about it. Davius was honest about it. Other people have been honest. And if you listen to Coach's Corner, we're honest about that. So just something to be aware of anyhow. We don't walk around, you know, thinking that we walk on water. We all know our faults very, very well, and we probably think about them as much as you think about whatever you think your faults are.
Well, and I think we think about those things because they're the things that challenge us. So it's the winning, like Ragnavaldr is like, I don't know who I won against. They put a crown on my head, but I can't tell you who I won. I'll tell you everybody that challenged me or hit me because those are gifts. Those gifts allow us to get better. Right? And that's what your opponent is giving you. He's giving you a gift. And that's really that's the greatest players in almost any sport think the exact same way here. They don't go patting themselves on the back because as soon as you're patting yourself on the back, you're saying you're good enough. Now that doesn't mean that you shouldn't still appreciate where you're at because you have to appreciate when you do hit goals. And then you reset those. Or when you believe that somebody set you as a bar, then you have to be more accountable, right? So in a way, it's harder, but it's still a gift as well because, and you have to be aware of that because if you're not, and you may not be the bar somebody set later when you're shucking shots or not taking stuff or acting terrible, or mistreating people, all of those things. So just be aware on that. So everybody was taking notes, so I decided to take a few notes. And I have actually been taking a few. There is a ton of subjects in here. But before we go, though, because this one's going to jump into one of them, we had a question. How should one balance the line between measuring oneself against others in a healthy way in order to set the bar and then failing in a toxic comparison competitiveness? So that's 100%, a thing that happens. I think there's some negative parts about setting a bar or even about picking somebody as your bar. And one of those is, there's nothing wrong with being competitive. Being competitive actually pushes you mentally and physically to be a better person. So being competitive isn't a bad word. It's just like when people say stress. Well, guess what? Lots of people, you're on this show listening, you're taking time out to listen to get better. You're putting more stress on yourself all the time. If stress was bad, why are you doing it? Because you want to get better. Stress is good. Stress allows us to push ourselves a little farther. You're going to apply stress. And as you push yourself farther, you get better at managing that stress. So that stress, the level of amount of stress you can start managing gets higher. So there is nothing wrong with being competitive. Toxic comparison and competitiveness, there is. And this goes back to this fine line conversation I have about, there's that fun, Davius talked about setting, kind of just coming in and having fun. So sometimes fun, you're going to miss stuff and you're not looking at becoming better all the time. You're just out there having fun. You're not thinking about techniques and you're not thinking, they'll get better, but mostly just naturally. And then there's the other end where you're so competitive, you don't want to take people's blows. Here's a big red flag. When you believe, when you know you're the bar, because that people are literally coming and finding you and fighting you, or you have an award and you are the bar now, and you hold that so deep that now you cheat. There's the negative side of being the bar. So there's a real fine line where you can have fun, you can become better at what you're doing, and you can be an example, the bar for others. It's easy to fall off a little bit all the time on either end, and that's okay. People make mistakes. The trick is get back on it. So when you're talking about that balance, the competitive is perfectly fine. Be careful at setting that bar. There's also the negative effect of setting your bar so high that you start blowing off shots because you think that's the only way you're going to get there, right? Well, that couldn't have hit me, and I'm going to tell you, there's probably a lot of people in this show right now that, you get to a point sometimes where mentally you don't even realize that you set your own bar, and now you believe that somebody else can't win. And that's a hard place. Oh, that blow couldn't have been good, right? Because he couldn't win because I'm better. So there's a lot of negative sides to the bar, and we're going to talk a couple more things, but we are running out of time, unfortunately. It's one of these episodes again that we could probably do stuff. It's probably done a second one. So let me throw Ragnavaldr on. He had his hand up.
I'm looking at the words in this, and I think I get his point, so I'm going to address that. But I just want to be clear on something. That I don't think the toxic part and competitive are hand in hand. I think all of this is competitive, and like you said, being competitive, that's why we're here. That's a huge part of why we're here. Yeah, we love this game, but those of us who are in it, who have been in it long enough, like you said, those who watch Coach's Corner, you're here to improve. Therefore, you are competitive. It's just who you are. So what we're really talking about is how you're applying that, and how do you do the balance. I'm not sure there's a balance. I think it's being clear on which is which. And I think the way to measure that is ask yourself if when you're fighting someone and you're winning, are you happy about that because your performance is improving? In other words, the thing that you're working on succeeded, therefore your performance has improved? Or are you happy because you feel like a better person now? My self-worth has increased because I can beat people. If you think it's for self-worth, then it's toxic. Okay, we all want to avoid toxic, but we're not always clear on what toxic is. And I think that's what the toxic is. If you have to beat people for you to feel self-worth, that's toxic. Somebody else has to suffer, somebody else has to lose for you to feel good. That's not the same. It's all competition, but did you do it so you feel better, or did you do it because it improved? I beat that person because I finally figured out how to throw that damn shot, and I finally got them. Yes, I got the victory. You know what? That's freaking awesome. You worked on a thing and you achieved it. And that person's skill is what makes that victory great. But I'm not a better person because I beat that person. So that's how I would clarify that.
Yep. No, I think that's great. So we're running up against, let's see, it's about 5 minutes more of the show. I want to just bring up a couple things we talked about here. And then I'm going to bring up one very last thing before we leave. We talked a lot of things. We talked about, the bar to being a master of defense or a knight, right? We talked about, or an AOA level or a GOA level. The bar was defined as expectation. The bar is defined as goals. Switch myself over. There's personal bars, there's group bars, there's a society level bar, right? We covered a little bit on setting a bar too high. And what I mean by that is sometimes you set the bar so high that you just can't get there, and you fail, and you leave. So be careful. You want your bar to be very much granular. Take it in small bites.
It should be your bar should be rungs on a ladder.
That's correct. And setting the bar too low doesn't promote growth. So be aware. There's two sides of that. Being a bar, we covered, what it is to be the bar, and not know, right? We have people who are like, well, or in fact, I'll take Bess's example. Yes, your grace, he can't beat you, right? That's a great understanding. And then there's the knowing you're the bar. Davius talked about that. People use him as a bar. They use Ragnavaldr as a bar. Traveling, there's a lot of times they're like, hey, come out and train. Sometimes that also means come out and fight us so I can see where we are on the scale. And that's all over the known world. Again, nothing necessarily wrong with that. Just make sure you're communicating that scenario, because you may not be at 100%. And do you really want training, or do you want to check the bar, right? I really like the bar as awards. And there was just somebody mentioned something about, just asking to be clear that there's a bar for AOA, GOA, POA. And my answer was, if you're fighting, your peers are a bunch of people with AOA level awards, you probably should have one, right? Unless you remember, the bar is not just made up of prowess. The bar is made up of character. The bar is made up of all of those other pieces that feed in. So that you may see somebody that maybe that's not as good a fighter as you, but incredible person. And that may tick them up and allow them to get it before you. So be careful judging others on that fact. The bar equals expectation, right? That kind of came out in this a little bit. So just remember, there's a lot of bars in here, and that the bar can be a lot of things, and there's a lot of emotion around it. I read a little bit, and there's a dark side on the bar, and I wanted everybody to understand that. When we look at professional sports, there's psychological distress from not being able to be the bar anymore. In other words, why you're hurt, or somebody's just better than you and you can't get past it. There's overtraining and burnout. It happens because you're trying to stay the bar for so long. There's anything from that can happen from mood disorder and all those things. But at the end, and then we go right into what happens at the end of your career when you can't be the bar anymore, and you can't actually even get to the bar because physically you're done. Or you're just aging out. And it happened. I know, but it's
okay, I'm old.
So we well, and all of those are those are scary parts, and we all deal with them. I've dealt with incredible. I just a couple of years ago, before COVID, learned that I had to get shoulder replacements, and 4 of my doctors that I went to said, well, congratulations, you're done fighting ever. So, being a life of fighting at a high level, I was losing a huge part of my life that I relied on to actually keep the positive side of that was to keep depression, which I struggle with, out of my life. And then I was going to lose that. So, there's a lot of negative sides of running, or, of the being the bar. But I will tell you, I wouldn't give any of them up for the last 30 years of being around friends and being able to help others, get to that space. So, I think that conversation was super important. to have on all the positive effects, because it is. I left the negative effects to a short list because they're things you'll have to deal with, but the positivities in the rest of your life is huge. So, hey, who has we've got a little bit more time. We'll push it just past to say last few words. Anybody want to say last few words?
I can.
Okay.
This is a topic I never really thought of before. Well, a couple of days ago when you asked me to be on the show. Bars can be a very beneficial thing, or they can be a very, very destructive thing. And for me, they've been both. I was very young and very ambitious when I started this, and setting a bar got me a lot of success early, but it also got me a lot of burnout, and it because at the age of 24, I was like, God, I don't want to do this anymore. And then, because I've accomplished my goals, but man, at what cost? You have to think when you set goals and set bars that you do them in a sane fashion. And that's my point on that. Also, we talked some about the dark side of the bar. I mean, you're right. I've seen people that I absolutely love just totally throw everything away to achieve a crown or a champion's fight or whatever, because it was the bar for them was winning crown or being an undefeated champion or being whatever, and they just let that take over their soul, and this is seeing somebody as a bar is a good thing, but you also got to realize when you see an individual as a bar, understand they're a human being. They have on days, they have off days, they have, they might have slept wrong that night. I mean, you never know what the person you said is your bar is up to. I mean, so I mean, there's a lot to this subject, and boy, we could probably spend 3 hours on this, but I'll let the rest of you talk now.
Elizabeth, you got anything you'd like to say at the end there? Ragnavaldr, I'll come right back to you.
No, that's cool. Go ahead.
No, no.
Yes.
Oddly, I have nothing to say.
I know, I love it, and thank you for getting on the episode. I know you're like, well, I'm nobody's bar. Well, I think you're a lot more people's bar than you think you are.
Davius, you and I, when you were talking, I was like, yeah, you and me were like this, man. Sometimes it's hard to be a bar. You're like, yeah, I'm just a mess. I feel all these insecurities. I know all my inadequacies. I don't know all my non-peer like attitudes about things and my mean thoughts inside sometimes. And I think, oh, I shouldn't be a bar, and yet sometimes I am. But I want to say thank you for those of you, if I am a bar to you, because it helps me strive to be a better person. So thanks.
Ragnavaldr.
I just want to remind people to watch where you set the bars. Setting high bars is fine, but set some in between bars. But that's all I'm going to say on it, because I think what Ronald said at the end is actually a far more valuable thing for people to keep in their heads when you walk away from this going after bars and all those kinds of things. I think a lot of us do. But his point about how they can be destructive, and any pursuit means a sacrifice of something else. What are you sacrificing to get to that point? So be clear on not just where you're going, but what it takes for you to get there. And is that price okay? And I think, again, coming back to myself and learning not to get in the way of other people's fun, understand that when you set a bar for somebody else, you're putting expectations on them that they may have to pay a price that they just don't want to pay. We've got people at our practice I know could be better than they are, but they just don't dedicate themselves. So I can look at that as they're failing, or I can open up my eyes and say, this person has a busy life and is achieving other things that are more important than this. I don't want to cut in the way of that. So I think the last note I'd like to leave people with is listen to what Duke Ronald said. Set your bars, but understand what it's taking you to get there. And are you willing to, is that really the price you want to pay for that?
Well said.
Just one. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but just to what Ragnavaldr said about what it's going to cost to get to my goals. I pretty much gave up my entire teenage experience. I missed my junior and senior prom. I basically my entire existence was the SCA besides going to high school. So, you know, and I look back and go, man, I could have done a lot more stuff as a teenager, but I was too busy chasing the prize. But
Yep.
Thank you.
Oh, sure.
Davius, thank you for, first I'd like to say thank you for bringing this idea up. I think it went well.
I hope so. I think so too. I definitely think there's a trade-off, like everyone has said, about how much you want to put in. Like, don't let these goals, like, you have to set realistic, quote unquote, win-loss conditions, right? Like, it's not just about how many people you knock in the head. It's about, are you getting better as a person and as a better fighter, right? Like, one of my rules when I would give out a scarf when I was just an ogre is only if I felt I could help you be a better Scadian. You didn't need a scarf from me to try to help you be a better fighter. If you wanted me to help you try to get more integrated into or make your SCA experience better for you, I could do that. And that's something that I would do for a scarf, but not just help you fight better. And that's what I think Duke Ronald is saying and Ragnavaldr is saying. Like, you have to make sure that your SCA experience isn't damaged by your chase to get to your bars, right? Like, your life experience isn't damaged by your chase to get to your bars. Like, you need to set goals, but everything in moderation, right? Like, everything needs to fit into your life, right? You can't be missing work because, you know, you're driving yourself to try and get that white belt, right? Because you can't go to events if you can't pay your bills, right? You see what I'm saying? So, like, you can't, you know, be breaking yourself physically, you know, to try and get to these bars, because then you can't perform at that level. You can't be who you're trying to turn into. Like, you can't be a knight if you can't fight anymore because you tore your shoulders up trying to get that white belt, right? You can't be a mod if you blew out both your knees trying to win every fight for 4.5 years so you could get, you know, the collar, right? You have to make sure that they fit into your life and you keep your life being important to you rather than just this one singular goal is a big thing for me. But again, and like Ronald also said, that's balanced, right? Like, because there are some people who don't work as hard as they could, right? And it's not because they don't have time. It's just because they don't work as hard as they could. So you can either, you know, take it easy and not get to your bars because you're not working hard enough, or sometimes you can push too hard to get to your goals and then you mess the rest of your life up. You just have to, everything has to be intelligently handled, and you have to look at everything in the whole picture, and not just the bar.
All right. So we'll go ahead and wrap up tonight. First, I'd like to thank everybody. We went a little over, but I think the end of this discussion was super important. Thank you, Ron, for bringing that up, and all of you for kind of feeding in on that last piece. You know, be kind to yourself out there, and be careful. Good point is we have a show next week, and next week's show is Bess. Do you know it? I'm going to throw that out to you. She's looking it up real quick. I can see her trying to.
Actually, no. I was remembering that I'm on the 29th.
Okay, so we do have a show next week, and it is Penzic, the Great Learning Opportunity. And
wow, what a terrific episode!
I agree.
Who suggested that?
Yeah,
So does that mean that you're on that show?
We talked earlier.
God, I hope so.
Okay.
No, you're at the wrong studio. No, pretty sure this is the right place. Look, dude, we don't do no country music.
So I'm not sure. I'm getting some feedback. So
Wow.
Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. So my big piece is to be great at something, Pensic is an opportunity to fight hundreds of other people. It's an opportunity to learn from those people. It's an opportunity to participate and help those people. And I think these are the things that we're going to talk about next week. I know I use Pensic in this way, and really, it was my way to help train everybody in the society where in the past, I might have only been able to train in my kingdom or maybe a couple kingdoms near me. It was a way to fight all the best fighters and push myself even after I was knighted and won crown twice. It's still the place I go push myself. So Pensic is a great learning opportunity, and we want to share some of that with you and where to go and you know how to get the best out of it you can. So we're hoping to share those ideas next week, and we look forward to the discussion. I really appreciate, and I'll call out everybody, all our audience here. Thank you for the great conversation. And there's in the comment area a lot of really good conversation in there. Thank you for the feedback, and we hope to see you next week.
Thanks,
Bye, guys.
everybody.